The desert town of Redwater was still shaking, the sleep from its bones, when a lone rider approached the boarding shack at the edge of the street. Morning light had barely touched the red cliffs, and a thin sheet of dust drifted across the ground like a warning. Clara, wrapped in a frayed wool coat, stood beside the woodpile with her 12-year-old son, Eli, splitting kindling for the day's meager breakfast fire. They had arrived only 3 nights ago, another nameless stop in a long string of temporary shelters stretching back years. Clara believed she had outrun everything that might remember her. Moneylenders, ranch owners, a few men with questions she did not want to answer. Nothing ever came looking for a woman who moved often and spoke little, which was why her hands froze on the axe handle when the rider called out, "Clara Boone!" His voice was neither hard nor friendly, simply certain. Clara stiffened. Eli's small hand tightened around her sleeve. People like her didn't get visitors, certainly not men wearing crisp coats with brass buttons and the seal of the Territorial Probate Office on the breast. The rider dismounted carefully, removing his hat with the solemnity of a man delivering bad news. "I've been searching for you since spring," he said. "You're difficult to track." Clara's pulse thudded. That's the point, she thought. "What do you want?" she asked, stepping slightly in front of Eli. He withdrew a sealed envelope from his coat. "It concerns your grandfather, Elias Ward." The name hit her like a blow from the barrel of a pistol. Elias Ward, the old mountain rancher she had not seen since she was 16, a man as stubborn as the rocks under his boots. He had raised her for a handful of years before life yanked her elsewhere. She remembered the smell of sagebrush on his coat, the creak of his leather chair, the stories he told about the land and the secrets he said the mountain kept. He passed 2 winters ago. The writer continued. Complications delayed the final deed transfer. You're the last living heir. His property is yours now. Clara nearly laughed. Elias Ward had not been wealthy, not even close. His homestead had been little more than a cabin pressed into the side of Lone Mesa, a barn hardly fit for mice, and a stubborn mustang he'd sworn the county would never take. But a roof was still a roof, even a dying one. She signed the receipt with hands roughened by years of wandering. When the writer left, the envelope felt impossibly heavy in her palm. Eli tugged her sleeve. "Ma, where is it?" Clara opened the letter slowly, as if expecting it to vanish like a desert mirage. Inside was a formal deed granting her ownership of Ward's Bluff, a secluded piece of land north of Lone Mesa. There was also a handwritten warning on the back. "Main cabin standing out, building condemned." Do not ignore her grandfather's scrawl. Sharp, familiar, unsettling, Clara exhaled. "We're going home," she murmured, though she wasn't sure the land had ever felt like home. By noon they had gathered their few belongings. The same patched bedroll, the same tin cups, the same battered satchel, and traded the last of their coins for 2 seats on a supply wagon heading west. The land unfurled before them as they rode sprawling plains, jagged cliffs, cottonwoods bending in the wind. Eli leaned against her arm, half dozing as the wagon rattled over hard earth. "You think the place is safe?" he asked. Clara hesitated. "Safe enough for us to rest," she said. "And that's more than we've had." When they reached the base of Ward's Bluff by late afternoon, with the wagon long gone, Clara and Eli trudged up the narrow trail carved into the hillside. The air tasted like dust and juniper. Shadows crawled over the land as sun dipped behind the rock. Then Clara saw it, the cabin, or what remained of it. The roof sagged like a tired mule. The porch had collapsed into a nest of broken planks. One shutter clung to the window by a single hinge, creaking with every breath of wind. But the stone foundation still stood firm, stubborn as the man who built it. "It's not much," Eli whispered. "No," Clara agreed softly. "But it's ours now." They pushed open the door. Dust swirled in sunbeams. The air smelled of old timber, ashes, and something faintly sweet, sage, perhaps. The interior was nearly untouched. Elias's rocking chair sat beside the cold hearth. His tin coffee pot rested on the stove. A blanket she remembered from childhood lay folded on the cot, faded, nearly white. Something inside her chest tightened. Memories she had buried years ago stirred like embers, catching wind. As Eli explored the small room, Clara noticed a folded paper on the mantel, her grandfather's handwriting again. If you're reading this, the mountain still remembers you, and you must follow what it shows, indescribed. Her breath quickened, a prickle running along her arms. Elias always spoke like the land was alive, like it listened, like it held grudges. Clara had learned over the years that the mountain did hold something. If not grudges, then secrets. Before she could unfold the note further, a sound outside made Eli gasp. "Ma! Someone's out there!" Clara's heart hammered as she rushed to the doorway. A shape moved across the yard. A horse, but no ordinary ranch pony. Large chestnut brown with a silver streak down its muzzle. Her grandfather's mustang still alive. The animal approached slowly, eyes steady, ears forward as if recognizing her. "Ma, is that his?" Clara nodded, throat tight. "His name is Rust. Elias said he'd outlive us all." Rust nudged her gently. Then his head dipped toward the note still clutched in her hand, snorting as if urging her to read. Clara unfolded the rest. "If Rust finds you, follow him. He remembers what I couldn't tell you." A cold breeze swept across the bluff. Rust turned and began walking toward the tree behind the cabin, glancing back to ensure she followed. "Ma," Eli whispered. "Where's he going?" Clara swallowed. "Hard. To something my grandfather hid," she said. "Something the county never believed, and something someone else may want kept buried." She gripped Eli's hand. "Get your jacket. We're going with him." As they stepped toward the darkening woods, Clara felt its eyes on them, watching from somewhere beyond the trees. The mountain was holding its breath, and whatever Elias Ward had tried to hide, it was waiting. Rust led them deeper into the woods behind the cabin, stewing softly on old pine needles. The sun dipped behind the Mia, staining the sky in dying shades of gold and purple. Clara felt Eli's small fingers clutch her sleeve tighter with each step. The trees grew denser, forming a canopy that swallowed the fading light. For a moment, Clara wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Following a half-wild mustang into the forest at dusk was not the kind of choice a sensible woman made in the West. But Elias Ward had never been simple or predictable. If he had left a message for her, it meant something important. Russ stopped at a clearing, and Clara barely remembered an opening in the earth like a wound. At its center sat a stone, structure no bigger than a shed, hunched under the weight of tangled vines and time. Eli stepped closer. "That's the condemned building." Clara nodded slowly. "That's the one." It looked older than the cabin, older than any miner shack she'd ever seen. The door hung crooked on rusted hinges, claw marked by wind and age. Clara tried to imagine her grandfather old alone dragging crates or tools out here. The thought made her chest tighten. Russ snorted sharply and pawed the ground. "He wants us inside," Eli whispered. Clara exhaled, pushing back her fear. "Stay close." She pressed her shoulder to the door. It groaned open, releasing a breath of cold, stale air. Inside was darkness, heavy, waiting. Clara raised her small oil lantern. The flame flared, casting the walls in trembling light. Eli inhaled sharply. "Ma, look." Wooden crates, dozens of them, stacked to the rafters, each marked with an insignia. Even time hadn't erased. Red Hawk Mining Concert. Clara frowned. Red Hawk had been gone for nearly 20 years. Bankrupt, swallowed by scandal after half its engineers. Vanished, and its ledgers conveniently burned in a warehouse fire. "What would they want with this place?" she murmured. Eli ran his fingers over the nearest crate. "Maybe Grandpa worked for them." "No," Clara said. "He hated mining companies. Said they stole more from the land than they ever gave back." She pried a rusted crowbar from the wall and wedged it under the crate lid. It took her 3 stubborn, breathless attempts before the wood finally gave way, snapping open with a sharp crack that echoed like a gunshot. Inside lay cylinders of metal wrapped in canvas, heavy, cold. "What are they?" Eli asked. Clara lifted one, her arm dipped under its weight. "Core samples," she said quietly. From deep underground, her grandfather had always claimed. The mining men drilled where they shouldn't, on lands they never paid for. Land they trespassed on because no one powerful enough cared to stop them. Clara set the sample down, feeling the weight of her grandfather's warnings settle on her shoulders. Whatever he had known, whatever he'd hidden here, it had been dangerous enough to scare an entire company into lies. A twig snapped outside. Clara spun, lantern trembling. Rust backed away from the shed, muscles taut, nostrils flaring, his ears pinned flat against his head. "Ma," Eli whispered, stepping closer to her side. Another crack, slow, deliberate, like someone placing their weight carefully on a dead branch. Someone watching. Clara extinguished the lantern with a swift breath. Instant darkness swallowed them. "Stay behind me," she whispered, hand finding Eli's shoulder. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears as she slipped through the shed doorway, the night air colder than before. Russ stood facing the trees, head low and threatening. He gave a warning rumble deep in his chest, the kind horses made when predators circled too close. Clara strained her eyes. Between the trunks, something shifted, human-shaped, tall, unmoving, watching. "Who's there?" she called, voice steady but loud enough to cut through the quiet. No answer, only the soft hiss of wind slipping between leaves. Clara took one step forward. The figure vanished into the darkness without breaking a single branch. Rust snorted anxiously and nudged Clara's shoulder, urging her back toward the path. "Ma, let's go," Eli whispered, trembling. Clara grabbed the cylinder she'd opened, wrapped it in her coat, and hurried toward the cabin. Rust walked beside them like a guardian, glancing back at the tree-line with every few steps. They didn't speak again until they reached the clearing where the cabin stood. Inside, Clara bolted the door and lit the stove. When warmth finally seeped into the room, Eli collapsed onto the cot. "Exhausted. Who do you think it was?" he asked. "A drifter," Clara lied softly. "Or a hunter." But her heart knew better. A drifter did not stand still and watch. A hunter did not vanish without sound. Someone knew she had come back. Someone who wanted her grandfather's secret to stay buried. As the fire crackled, Clara turned the metal cylinder in her hands. Under the soot and time, she found numbers stamped into the steel. Coordinates, depth, date. She felt her stomach twist. "Eli," she whispered, "these aren't just samples. They're proof. Proof that Red Hawk Mining drilled far outside their claimed land. Proof Elias Ward had been right. Maybe even proof worth killing." For a soft sound came from outside, the creak of a branch bending underweight. Clara stiffened. Russ let out a low, angry whinny from the yard. "Ma," Eli whispered. Clara moved to the window, easing the shutter open a sliver. In the moonlight she saw nothing, only the woods, only shadows. But the feeling of being watched lingered heavy as the mountains themselves. She turned back to Eli and knelt beside him. "Well, leave at dawn," she said. "We need answers, and someone in town might finally be willing to listen." She didn't say the rest. "Before whoever is out there decides we shouldn't have come back." Rust whinnied sharply, warning. Not greeting, Clara rose, heartbeat hammering. Her grandfather's secret had woken something, and someone was closing in. Dawn broke pale and brittle over Ward's Bluff, painting the land in a cold gold that did nothing to settle Clara's tightening nerves. She had barely slept. Every creak the cabin made in the wind felt like a footstep just outside the door. Every thump in the woods sounded like the watcher returning. Russ stood near the porch as the sun climbed. Ears alert, eyes trained on the trees. Clara stroked his muzzle. "Guard the place," she whispered. She didn't know if the mustang understood her, but he snorted softly and remained rooted like a sentinel carved from desert stone. Eli slung on his coat, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Whoever was out there last night, do you think they'll come back?" Clara glanced at the tree-line. "Not if we leave before they expect it." They set off down the narrow trail that wound toward Redwater. Eli walked close, his hand often brushing hers. The chilly morning air carried the scent of pine and dust and something like anticipation. Clara had lived long enough to know when the past had begun to stir. Redwater was slowly waking when they arrived. Smoke drifted from chimneys, storefronts creaked open, and the rumble of a distant stagecoach echoed between the buildings. But Clara wasn't here for supplies. She had something heavier to carry today. The wrapped core sample weighed on her back like a stone from the mountain itself. Their first stop was the town library, a humble building of sun-bleached wood. Inside, shelves sagged with old books and ledgers, and dust floated like slow-moving snow. The librarian, a stern woman in her 60s, with spectacles perched low on her nose, eyed Clara with quiet scrutiny. "You're new in town," she said. "Most folks don't come in this early unless they need something specific." Clara set the wrapped cylinder on the desk. "I need answers." The librarian unfolded the cloth, a stern expression shifting to surprise. She lifted the sample, turning it thoughtfully. "Haven't seen one of these since my father worked the assays," she breathed. "This is Red Hawk work." End quote. Clara nodded. "Found it on my grandfather's land." Elias Ward, recognition passed across the librarian's face like a shadow. "Elias, yes. I remember him coming into town, shouting about stolen claims. Folks chalked it up to old age." Clara's jaw tightened. He wasn't wrong. The librarian hesitated a moment, then made a decision. "Jim Dunley's your man. Used to be a company geologist before Red Hawk went under. He studies maps here on Tuesdays." She leaned close. "And he's honest more than I can say for most men tied to mining." Clara's pulse quickened. "Where can I find him?" "Right here." The librarian pointed to the corner table where an elderly man hunched over a collection of brittle maps. His hands, though wrinkled, moved with deliberate care. Jim looked up as Clara approached. His gaze fell to the cylinder immediately. "Is that what I think it is?" Clara said it before him. "I need to know where it came from." Jim unwrapped it fully, examining the metal casing, the faded stamp, then the exposed layers of stone. He held it up to the light, as if reading a story embedded in the earth. "Well," he muttered, "either someone forged this perfectly, or Red Hawk drilled on land they had no legal right to touch." Clara leaned in. "Those numbers, are they coordinates?" Jim nodded grimly. "Coordinates, depth, date, and this." He tapped a pale mineral streak running through the stone. "Lithium-rich vein. This would have been worth a fortune. Enough to make a company break a few laws. Enough to make them bury whatever proof they found." Eli exhaled softly, eyes wide. Clara swallowed. "My grandfather tried to warn the county." Jim set the core down gently. "And they ignored him because the company paid their bills." "Classic story." She felt a pressure in her chest, anger mixed with painful vindication. Elias Ward had been dismissed as a stubborn, rambling old man, but he had been telling the truth. Jim leaned forward. "You need someone who can turn this into a fight they can't ignore. Harper Finch, lawyer. She's tough as desert iron." The lawyer's office sat inside a narrow White House with a sign reading Harper Finch, attorney. No appointment needed if trouble's real. Harper was in her late 30s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She listened silently as Clara recounted everything from the deed to the shed to the watcher in the woods. When Clara finished, Harper rolled the core cylinder in her hands. "This is the kind of evidence that makes mining executives lose sleep." She slid a contract across the table. "I work on contingency. If we win, I take a cut. If we lose, you owe nothing. But I'll warn you, companies like Red Hawk didn't stay alive this long by playing fair." Clara steadied her breath. "I'm not afraid of a fight." "Good," Harper replied, "because you just stepped into one." Word spread quickly through town. People whispered. Some offered sympathy. Others muttered that Clara was stirring up trouble that should have stayed buried. After meeting with Jim again to prepare affidavits, Clara and Eli walked toward the livery to rent a horse for the ride home. That's when she noticed him. A man leaning against a lamp-post. Tall, dark coat, hat tugged low. He wasn't reading a newspaper. He wasn't watching the street. He was watching her. Clara felt the same cold prickle she had felt in the woods. "Eli," she said quietly, "stay close." They continued walking. The man didn't move, didn't follow, but his eyes tracked them all the way down the street. Harper caught up to them near the edge of town. "You see him?" she murmured. "You know him?" "No," Harper said, "but I know the type. Company man paid to watch, not talk." Clara stiffened. "He was at the cabin last night." Harper cursed under her breath. "That means they already know what you found." Clara's hand tightened on Eli's shoulder. "What do we do now?" Eli asked. Harper looked Clara dead in the eyes. "You push forward," she said. When mining companies start prowling around a widow and her child, it means they're scared. And fear means leverage. The Mustang Rust was waiting anxiously when they returned to the bluff at dusk. He paced agitated, as if sensing the danger trailing behind them. Inside the cabin, Clara set the core sample on the table. It didn't look like much, just metal and stone, but it was enough to expose a stolen mountain, enough to shame a powerful company, enough to risk someone's life. Clara looked at Eli, then at the darkening woods. "We're not running anymore," she whispered. Eli nodded slowly. Grandpa would want us to finish what he started. The wind pressed against the windows, rattling them softly. Somewhere beyond the trees, a branch snapped. Clara snuffed the lamp and stood very still. They were not alone on Ward's Bluff, and Red Hawk Mining knew exactly where to find them. Night soaked into Ward's Bluff like ink spreading across paper. Clara stood at the window long after Eli had fallen asleep, watching the tree for movement. The cabin walls creaked in the wind, but beneath that natural sound, she sensed something else, an unnatural stillness, like the land was waiting for something to break. Rust stood outside the door, refusing to settle. His ears flicked constantly, tails swishing with agitation. Clara had seen horses frightened before, but this was different. He wasn't afraid. He was guarding. When dawn finally brushed pale light over the mere, Clara hadn't slept a minute. Eli stirred, rubbing his eyes. "Did anything happen?" "No," Clara said softly. "But today everything starts. They say